Exposed. How a dinner insult from my boyfriend's father transformed my life in 30 incredible days. Sarah stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of her second-hand blouse, fighting the instinct to retreat. Dinner with Mark's family. They called it an evening that felt more like an audition for a role she wasn't sure she wanted. The upscale home, adorned with modern art and golden candelabras, radiated a world where polished manners could intimidate even the strongest warrior. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead, another stage to navigate in a life fraught with uncertainty. As the evening progressed, laughter mingled with the aroma of gourmet food, filling the air with a facade of warmth. Mark's father, a well-groomed man with a penchant for condescension, surveyed Sarah from across the table as if she were a specimen under glass. When it happened, the swift, cutting remark, she felt everyone tense. Environmental research? How practical can that be? The laughter stuttered to a halt, and Sarah suddenly found herself shrinking in the pulsating silence. The smirk on Mark's father's face seemed to reflect the dismissal she had faced time and again. The heaviness of his words settled like a weight on her chest, igniting a familiar ember of self-doubt. Shouldn't you be focused on something a bit more relevant? He added. Those moments where the world deemed her efforts insignificant threatened to break her completely. Why hadn't she seen this coming? She felt the corners of her resolve curl inward. The flames of her passion dimmed in the face of this polished condescension. With a newfound spark igniting deep within, she snuck outside, shoving her hands into the pockets of her coat, the cool air hitting her face like a dash of cold water. I'll show them, she whispered to herself, determination crystallizing in her heart. Haunted by the evening's events, the days that followed were a cycle of heightened anxiety punctuated by resolve. She dived headfirst into her childhood project research on local water contamination. Her findings slipped through her fingers like sand until now, when each statistic felt like a lifeline. Late nights turned into restless mornings, papers strewn across her modest kitchen table. Mark's father's face loomed in her thoughts, a constant reminder of the stakes. What if this project was the key to proving her worth? To contribute something meaningful to her community, while dispelling the judgment of men like him? Questions caught fire in her mind, creating a blazing urgency fueled equally by fear and ambition. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the pressure escalated, each obstacle transformed into a new form of battle. Self-doubt clashed with relentless determination. A prestigious university had come knocking at her door, asking her to present her study, but with the opportunity came a mountain of doubt. Could she really stand up to experts, present her findings, and silence the inner voice that echoed her worthlessness? Would Mark understand the tumult within her? Or would he side with a father who would view her success as just another hobby? The night before the big presentation found her standing before the mirror once again, an unbearable weight on her shoulders. Each breath felt shallow. Who was she? An aspiring researcher, or just an echo of someone else's expectations? With everything swirling inside, she was at a precipice, questioning everything she believed about her dreams. Clenching her fists, she steeled herself against the tide of uncertainty. This time, I will not back down, she thought. But deep down a nagging voice whispered doubts of their own. As anxiety tangled with hope, the scar of that evening's insult stung anew, leaving Sarah caught between her authentic self and a fierce desire for acceptance. As dawn broke, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open and her papers spread before her like battle plans. Today was the day. A university auditorium would host her presentation, filled with seasoned professionals, people who had dedicated their lives to the problem she aimed to address. The sheer enormity of it made her reconsider her potential for success. She blinked rapidly as the weight of expectations hung over her like a heavy fog, suffocating yet familiar. Maybe she could fill her presentation with impressive findings, methodologies, and statistics, but what if the moment came when she had to answer questions? Her confidence wavered, and for a fleeting second, she entertained the thought of canceling. But then the memory of Mark's father's sneer reminded her of everything at stake. The feeling began as a flicker within her, then ignited into a blaze of resolve. She couldn't let anyone, especially not him, dictate her worth. Arriving at the university, her heart raced. The opulent surroundings felt alien. The gleaming marble floors reflected not only her image but also the embodiment of her insecurities. She took a deep breath, channeling her anxiety into focus. The world around her bustled with intellect, chatter, and excitement, while she stood anchored in a whirlpool of self-doubt. As the minutes ticked away, she slipped into the auditorium, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes scan her. The seats enveloped an audience eager to hear expert perspectives on pressing environmental issues. Each clicking pen, rustling paper, and hushed whisper fueled her nervousness. "Keep it together," she muttered to herself, pushing through the mental fog. Her name was called, and with it came an electric jolt of adrenaline. She walked toward the podium, her palms sweating against the cool surface, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside. She began speaking, her prepared slides flashing behind her. Her hands trembled slightly as she introduced her research, but as she delved into her findings on water contamination, momentum built. The data flowed clear and eloquent, like a current washing away doubt. With every statistic shared, every anecdote drawn from her community experiences, she recognized the significance of her voice. The passion she had stifled for too long surged back to life, propelling her forward with such fervor that she seemed to step outside of herself, becoming both spectator and performer. Then the inevitable moment arrived. A question from an audience member pierced through her confidence, an inquiry that forced her to articulate complex concepts while scrutinizing the implications of her research. She paused, absorbing the weight of the moment, the tension dripping like sweat off her brow. "Do you truly believe your findings can lead to actionable change?" the voice asked, critical and sharp. The room fell silent as every head turned toward her. There it was, a challenge, almost reminiscent of Mark's father's earlier jibes, laced with the same skepticism. This time, however, she felt an electric charge pulse through her veins instead of defeat. "Yes," she asserted, her voice steadying. "Change starts with understanding, and every effort we make adds up. Ignoring the problem won't make it disappear." The audience shifted, intrigued, perhaps surprised by her conviction. It was a small victory, but victory nonetheless. As she concluded, applause erupted, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Questions lingered in the air like wisps of smoke, some of them echoing around her thoughts. Had she transformed enough to face her challenges? And what awaited her after the applause faded? She stepped off the stage with a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside, untouched by the triumph yet uneasy about what was next. There was no turning back now. The next chapter loomed large, and even the shadows of self-doubt faded slightly in the distance. The time had come to face Mark's father again, but this time she did not just want to prove him wrong, she needed to confront the remnants of that evening's insults, not just for him, but also for herself. The applause faded, and the weight of realization sank in this presentation was merely a stepping stone. Sarah collected her belongings, each item feeling heavier than the last, and made her way back into the corridor. Her mind buzzed with adrenaline, replaying her words, the audience's expressions, and the feeling of the floor beneath her feet. Yet, as reality seeped back in, the tension of facing Mark's father loomed ominously on the horizon. Stepping outside, the sun blazed, almost reminiscent of her resolve moments ago. She squinted against the brightness, her thoughts swirling with equal parts joy and anxiety. The idea of confronting Mark's father felt daunting, and the memory of his scornful laugh haunted her. She had seen his dismissive attitude manifest towards not just her work, but her very essence. He had become the embodiment of her insecurities, and now she had to wrestle that demon. Caught in this internal battle, Sarah headed to a nearby cafe to gather her thoughts. As she sipped her coffee, the smell of roasted beans grounding her in the present, she intentionally reevaluated who she wanted to be rather than who others perceived her to be. "What do I stand for?" she asked herself. "My work isn't merely data. It's about improving lives." That understanding transformed her fear into something less paralyzing and more clarifying. The time for a confrontational dinner approached, But for her, this was not just an opportunity, it was a challenge to stand firm, not only against Marquez's father but the limiting perceptions of everyone she felt doubted her. With determination, she began outlining her rationale, crafting responses in her mind that went beyond simple rebuttals. She wanted to showcase her newfound confidence, a shift from proving him wrong to asserting her expertise and worth. That evening, as she approached Marquez's family home, the scent of grilled meat wafted through the air, curling around her like a playful reminder of home. As she stepped inside, her heart raced, but this time it was not engulfed in self-doubt, it was charged with purpose. The familiar faces turned toward her, and she held her head high, ready to engage. During dinner, conversation flowed around her like the bright colors of a painting. With each anecdote exchanged, she remained conscious of Marquez's father's gaze across the table. It was a quiet battle simmering beneath the pleasantries. He aimed barbs, subtle and bemusing, as if trying to provoke her into a defensive stance. Then, the moment she anticipated emerged, a comment dropped like a stone. You know, not everyone can turn their passion into a career. It takes true talent. His tone dripped with condescension, but Sarah didn't falter. Instead, she locked eyes with him, feeling a surge of clarity pulse through her veins. That's the difference, isn't it? Talent might be inherent, but passion and determination are cultivated, she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor inside. She recalled her audience's intrigue from earlier, her feelings today, and infused them into her response. I won't stop until I show that these findings can make a difference. We owe it to those who suffer from neglect. An unexpected silence fell after her assertion. The taste of victory was unfamiliar yet exhilarating. As the conversation shifted, Sarah noticed Marquez's approving glance, a flicker of pride evident in his eyes. Yet, behind her confidence, small seeds of doubt remained. She had faced one enemy, but what lay deeper in the shadows of her insecurities? She left that night, the weight of uncertainty still present, yet she found a sense of empowerment growing like new roots beneath the surface. Each moment felt significant, as though the battlefield that had once confined her was now littered with opportunity. Tomorrow she'd meet with fellow environmental activists, sharing her research for broader initiatives. Yet a lingering question floated above all others: would her self-doubt rear its head once more when met with skepticism from those even closer to the field? What awaited her was not only a chance to share her findings but the possibility of uncovering deeper strengths and confronting even tougher critics. As she prepared to turn the next corner of her journey, the stakes had never felt higher. The next morning, Sarah woke to a mix of excitement and trepidation. The sun streamed through her window, illuminating the clutter of her room, each item a testament to a life in transition. The memory of the previous night hung in her mind, Marquez's father's sneering comment and her surprising retort replayed like a film reel. She felt stronger, yet questions gnawed at her. Would that strength be enough to face her peers and the skepticism they might harbor? As she prepared for the meeting, Sarah meticulously organized her research materials, each chart and graph a reminder of the work she had poured her heart into. She took a moment to breathe, reminding herself of her mission. It wasn't about defending her abilities. It was about sharing knowledge that could drive change. This perspective reframed her anxiety into a pulse of enthusiasm. Arriving at the venue, she noticed the energy in the air, palpable with anticipation. A group of activists was already gathered, the murmur of voices an electric backdrop to her escalating heartbeat. Suddenly, the weight of expectation descended upon her. These were not just colleagues, they were advocates driven by passion, the very essence of her own purpose. Over the course of introductions, she scanned the room, observing the diverse faces of those who would evaluate her. Some looked eager, others skeptical. Each gaze seemed to peel back layers of her self-confidence, revealing the raw vulnerability she had fought so hard to mask. When it was finally her turn to present, the room quieted, anticipation giving way to silence. She stepped up to the front, her hands gripping the edges of the podium as she steadied herself. The presentation unfolded, her meticulously crafted slides illuminating the data she had gathered. She watched the eyes in the audience. Some nodded in agreement, others remained stoic, which fanned the flames of her inner critic. Halfway through, she paused, noting the shifting dynamics. Questions began to emerge, and the tone turned sharper. Can you justify these claims with more substantial data? One voice pressed. challenging her meticulously bounded research. The question pierced her confidence, sending her thoughts spiraling. Memories of last night's dinner surged back, the laughter of Mark's father echoing in her mind. Was she subjecting herself to the same skepticism here? But she hesitated only for an instant. In that fleeting moment, she remembered the purpose of her work, how it was driven by a desire to elicit change, to advocate for those unheard in the conversation. She took a breath, grounding herself as she responded, burying the echo of criticism deep within her psyche. As scientists and activists, I believe it's vital that we challenge our own findings and grow, she said, her voice gaining momentum. Every piece of research must stand up to scrutiny. If we cannot defend our conclusions, then we need to reflect and refine. That's what this work is about. Precision, constant improvement, and a commitment to transparency. A murmur rippled through the audience as she spoke, a chorus of attentiveness replacing the skepticism. She sensed an unspoken acknowledgement growing, a recognition that perhaps her passion outweighed any doubts they had previously harbored. After the presentation, conversations blossomed, and a few activists approached her, intrigued by her insights. Sarah's heart swelled with hope. She could see possibilities blooming where doubt once rested. Yet, as she engaged in newfound discussions, remnants of uncertainty lingered. The specter of Mark's father loomed larger than ever. How would she handle encounters with others, especially those who might echo his scorn? Did her growth quench the self-doubt, or did it merely mask the brewing storm? With new connections forming and the promise of collaboration on the horizon, Sarah felt invigorated but unsettled. The battle with her internal adversaries was not over. Her journey had just begun, and layers of complexity awaited her. What challenges would she face in the quest for acceptance and validity among experts? The uncertainty of her next steps was a gaping abyss, and she knew she had to brave those depths once again. As she opened herself to the possibility of unexpected critiques, she steeled herself for the inevitable. The real test of transformation lay ahead. As Sarah navigated the energetic crowd, a myriad of thoughts battled for dominance in her mind. The conversations around her buzzed like an indistinct hum, yet the words spoken earlier still echoed. She managed to exchange pleasantries, forcing a smile, but the thought of future interactions with Mark's father loomed, shifting her focus to the vulnerabilities that could be exposed again. The aftermath of her presentation left her feeling invigorated, yet a whisper of doubt clung to her every step. Each new connection felt like a delicate thread woven into a tapestry of potential, but she was all too aware of the fragility of her current state. What if the very same skepticism she sought to dismantle reared its head among this new group of peers? After mingling, Sarah retreated to a quiet corner with a cup of coffee, its warmth permeating her palms. She needed to recalibrate. She assessed her goals, each one a stepping stone toward a larger vision of advocacy and change. It wasn't just about the immediate response but rather about cultivating resilience in herself. After all, growth doesn't happen without discomfort. As she sipped, she observed the interactions taking place around her. Enthusiastic nods, fervent discussions. She was mesmerized by the passion that ignited within her peers. It dawned upon her that she too had this fire inside her. Maybe it was time to fan it more openly, allowing it to illuminate her path. She scribbled notes in a small notebook, ideas blooming like wildflowers, potential projects, studies she could spearhead, even forming support groups for women facing similar doubts in a field dominated by skepticism. Suddenly, Mark entered her field of view. His presence, at once comforting and daunting, made her stomach twitch. He waved and joined her at the table, and the familiar warmth swept over her. "You were incredible up there today," he exclaimed, his eyes brimming with admiration. Yet, the ghost of his father's disdain lingered in the background, a specter ready to overshadow any joy that moment could bring. "Thanks," Sarah replied, mustering genuine enthusiasm despite the lingering uncertainty. "I feel positive about the connections I made." Mark leaned closer, his voice low. "I know it was hard dealing with that question from, well, you know who." The look on his face mirrored her internal struggle. It was a silent acknowledgement of the challenge that lay ahead. "His opinions can feel like lies I tell myself," Sarah admitted, feeling a weight lift slightly as she voiced her fears. "But I refuse to let them define me, not anymore." Mark studied her intently. "You're stronger than you know, Sarah. What you did today was courageous. It's easy to want to shrink back, but you're standing up. This encouragement ignited something deep within her. Yes, she was standing up not just for herself but for all those overlooked and dismissed. Each fear she had carried now breathed with purpose, compelling her to dive deeper into her work and to reject narratives rooted in doubt. Feeling emboldened, Sarah shifted the conversation back to her goals, sharing her ideas for future collaborations, her aspirations becoming more crystalline. They discussed strategies to pitch projects as a united front with clarity and intent, infusing the dialogue with excitement. Yet, as the conversation unfolded, the specter of Marquez's father returned not as a ghost that haunted, but as a catalyst shaping her drive. The need to prove herself had transformed from a fear of inadequacy into a fervent desire to conquer skepticism, making her restless with determination as the evening wound down. A heavy cloud of resolve cloaked Sarah. She understood that the real test would prevail not just in the public eye but within the quieter, harsher judgments of her mind. Could she maintain this newfound strength amidst an avalanche of critiques? Unbeknownst to her, the forthcoming days would present unforeseen challenges that would not only test her will but force Sarah to confront her deepest insecurities. With every whispered doubt and external skepticism, she would have to forge her path anew. Steeling herself, she pondered the gravity of rejection. Would she crumble or would she rise fiercer than before? The next session loomed. The time had come to face her internal adversaries head-on, refusing to back down. The morning light filtered into Sarah's small apartment, illuminating the clusters of notes she had plastered on the walls, thoughts, ideas, and strategies that danced in vibrant colors. It was a chaotic tableau of her aspirations and apprehensions, a daily reminder of the multifaceted journey she had embarked upon. As she sipped her morning coffee, still half-heartedly swirling with the residue of sleep, the weight of her future pressed down on her like an invisible hand. That upcoming session loomed large in her mind. Today would not merely be about demonstrating her expertise, it was a chance to embody the resilience she had begun to cultivate. The realization struck her like a thunderbolt. Vulnerability was not a weakness but a gateway to authentic connection. However, a creeping doubt threatened to overshadow that revelation. What if her vulnerabilities were exploited again? What if Marquez's father managed to infiltrate her thoughts, undermining her efforts with a mere glance? To quell the rising tide of anxiety, Sarah engaged in a ritual that had positioned her well in the past, rehearsing her presentation. Pacing back and forth, she gave voice to her ideas, anchoring herself in the conviction of her purpose. Each word propelled her further into conviction, transforming nerves into adrenaline. The more she spoke aloud, the clearer her vision became. She noted how easily her voice faltered when she highlighted her accomplishments, how the criticism from Marquez's father loomed like a specter during those moments. But today she would practice acknowledging it, naming it, confronting the doubts that threatened to strangle her aspirations. As she rehearsed in front of the mirror, crafting each sentence, her resolve hardened. She was not merely speaking to a group. She was speaking for herself and for others who resonated with her narrative. She was not alone. Later, as she made her way to the session, the cacophony of city sounds intensified her heart's rhythm. Each honk of a horn, every passerby, was a reminder of the vibrant life bustling around her. Yet here she was, cocooned in her thoughts, fluctuating between anticipation and dread. Striding into the venue, she commanded her space. Each time her self-doubt whispered, she doubled down on her worth. She was prepared to translate vulnerability into strength. The seminar room radiated energy as peers gathered, eager to discuss significant issues demanding attention. The moment arrived, and with it, her momentary calm shattered like glass. Sarah could read the skeptical expressions begin to form as she approached the podium. Discomfort simmered beneath the surface, yet she leaned into it, drawing on the fire ignited within her just days prior. With measured breaths, she began her presentation. Each word carried intention. She layered her ideas with anecdotal evidence, infusing her passion into her voice. She was acutely aware of the skeptical gaze of a familiar figure seated at the back, Marquez's father. A flicker of unease rippled through her, but she chose to confront this insecurity, folding it into the narrative instead of shying away from it. Confidence is not the absence of fear. It's the commitment to rise despite it, she stated, looking directly toward him. The room froze in that moment. She acknowledged him without yielding to the weight of his potential judgment. Time seemed to stretch, allowing her to breathe through the tension. She pushed on through the slides filled with her innovative ideas, her clarity sharpening with each passing moment. A few skeptical eyebrows began to lift, and she sensed an internal shift in alignment of her thoughts and actions. By the time she concluded, a new energy pulsed around her. What she initially feared as condescension had morphed into curiosity and respect. As the applause filled the room, Sarah felt a rush of exhilaration coursing through her veins. It wasn't merely about winning over an audience. She had conquered something far deeper. The specter of Marquez's father faded into the background, replaced by the burgeoning strength she had nurtured within herself. But even in that triumph, something flickered at the edges of her consciousness: doubt, resilience, and a burning desire to continue evolving. As she scanned the room, exhilaration intermingled with unease. A sudden understanding illuminated her thoughts. Confronting external judgments would never cease, but what mattered was her resolve to persist. The next few days would test her resolve like never before, pushing her to confront newfound challenges with courage. She turned to leave the stage, heart still racing, aware that the hardest battles lay ahead. Whatever was on the horizon, she knew this. The moment of truth was approaching, and she was ready to face it. What would it demand of her? The echo of applause lingered in Sarah's ears as she stepped off the stage, but excitement quickly merged with a heavy sense of gravity. The moment had been fleeting, a temporary high that now faded into the reality of what lay ahead. The seminar was merely a stepping stone, and Sarah's thoughts drifted back to the disheartening words Marquez's father had hurled at her months ago. How they still thrummed in her mind like a persistent ache, forcing her to confront more than just the audience's scrutiny. She had to face herself. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, jolting her from the reverie. It was Mark, a simple text asking how it had gone. She typed back a quick reply, but a flood of self-doubt surged as she considered the weight of those moments before. Was she good enough? How could she turn this fleeting victory into a lasting transformation? Elizabeth, a trusted colleague who had mentored Sarah through countless challenges, caught her eye as she exited the auditorium. "You were brilliant," came the genuine praise. Elizabeth's sincerity grounded Sarah, providing a framework she hadn't realized she needed. "Did you see the way you handled yourself when you spoke to Marquez's father?" Elizabeth continued, eyes bright with encouragement. "That takes guts. It's time to harness that energy and focus on your next steps." Nodding, Sarah felt a flicker of clarity from Elizabeth's affirmation. She wasn't just fighting a personal battle. This was part of a larger awakening. It was time to put the strategies employed during her presentation into a more tangible context. This realization ignited a fire in her to formally pursue her ideas, to refine and execute a project she had set aside for too long. For the next few days, Sarah dove into research, brainstorming ways to integrate her passion for community engagement with professional development initiatives. Late nights turned into early mornings as she transformed her apartment into a makeshift office again, surrounded by notes, books, and digital tools. Her fear was still present, but it morphed into something more manageable, a source of motivation that propelled her forward. One evening, as she worked through a particularly troubling presentation slide, her exhaustion seeped into her thoughts. A small voice reminded her of the risks they had discussed in prior sessions. The thought gnawed at her. What would happen if Marquez's father found out? What if this venture fell flat on its face, all due to her inability to navigate the turbulence of the realm she was stepping into? But just then, Sarah recalled the applause, the realization that her vulnerability had turned into strength rather than weakness. Those moments of discomfort had provided her with insights. So she decided to face her fears head-on once more. It was not merely about avoiding judgment but learning to stand firm in her convictions, regardless of external opinions. With renewed determination, she set a deadline for her project proposal. Creating a timeline amplified the stakes. It wasn't enough just to have ideas. She needed to articulate them clearly and compellingly. As the date approached, her self-imposed pressure intensified. She began reaching out to old contacts, fostering potential partnerships and seeking feedback. Each conversation deepened her understanding of her audience's needs, and she tailored her approach accordingly. Then, just as Sarah was starting to feel a sense of rhythm, a chilling message came through from Mark. It was short and simple but carried a weight she couldn't ignore. "We need to talk." Anxiety twisted in her gut like a taut wire. Had his father gotten wind of her plans? Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at her phone. The stakes had never felt higher, and what had once been a catalyst for ambition had evolved into a crucible of doubt and conflict. It was time to step into the light and confront the repercussions of her newfound boldness. Did she have the courage to face whatever Mark had to say? With breathing exercises to calm her fears, Sarah prepared herself for an impending confrontation that could shift everything she was building. The next chapter lay on the horizon, whispering uncertainty and an invitation to self-discovery. What revelation awaited her when she spoke to Mark? As the minutes ticked by, the weight of that simple text felt like a looming storm cloud, darkening Sarah's thoughts and racing her heartbeat. Each second stretched into an eternity as she contemplated her response, her fingers hovering indecisively over the keyboard. She had meticulously planned out her project, diligently sculpting her vision of professional development that would engage and inspire. But now uncertainty crept in like a thief in the night. That a knock on her apartment door broke the silence, stirring her from the low hum of anxiety. Mark stood there, his expression unreadable. The casual charm she had come to expect was replaced by an intensity that threw her off balance. She drew in a shaky breath and nodded for him to come in. The air crackled with unspoken words. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice firmer than she felt. Mark hesitated, his eyes flickering to the floor before landing on hers. "It's about my dad," he started, words flowing like molasses. He heard some things about your project." Her stomach twisted at the implication. The fear of judgment she had wrestled with over the past few days threatened to manifest into something debilitating. "What did he say?" Mark shifted uncomfortably. "He thinks it could damage your career. He mentioned some things about you overstepping your bounds." The words hung heavy between them. Anger surged through her, fierce and unyielding. "He doesn't even know what I'm doing or the potential of it. I'm not overstepping. I'm being proactive." Mark flinched at her response, and Sarah took a moment to collect herself, fighting the urge to lash out further. "This is my dream," she continued, her voice quieter but steady. "Everything I'm building is about creating opportunities, not just for me, but for others." Why should his opinion even matter? "Because he's my dad," Mark replied, frustration lining his voice. "And he has connections that could help with what? Keeping me in a box? I want to be defined by anyone else's expectations." The fire in her spirit began to outshine her doubt. Sarah watched as Mark's face reflected a mix of confusion and concern. "You're passionate, but you have to consider the repercussions," he said. The conversation felt like a duel, with each word carrying the weight of a blade. Was it worth it? She was here, grappling with her path, while Mark clung to the safety net his father represented. Swallowing her frustration, Sarah decided it was time to take control. "Mark, I need you to understand something. I am going to move forward with this project. I believe in its value and its ability to create change. I won't let anyone, including your father, dictate my journey." A moment of silence stretched out, thick with tension. Then she saw a flicker of belief in Mark's eyes, almost imperceptible but there. "Are you sure?" he finally asked, his voice softening. For the first time, Sarah felt the full weight of her decision. She wasn't just standing her ground. She was staking a claim on her identity and future. "Yes, I'm sure. But it means I need your support, not your doubts." The atmosphere shifted, and for a fleeting moment, the storm clouds lifted. Mark nodded slowly, a mix of admiration and apprehension crossing his features. "I'll back you. I just want to make sure you think it through." "I promise I will," she replied, vulnerability creeping into her voice. "But I need you to trust me." His hand found hers, a tangible reminder of their connection amidst the chaos. Their fingers intertwined as they shared a moment of understanding, stepping deeper into uncharted territory together. As they stood in the room that had been a refuge, Sarah sensed a renewed sense of purpose rushing through her veins. She was no longer just a participant in someone else's narrative. She was the author of her own story, and it was time for her voice to be heard. Yet, amidst this wave of empowerment, uncertainty still lingered. While Sarah held the resolve to push forward, she couldn't shake the nagging thought of Mark's father, a looming obstacle she hadn't fully confronted. The conversation with Mark was merely a prelude to a larger, more daunting challenge that awaited her. And like a tide pulling back before a great wave, Sarah felt a force gathering in the distance, ready to crash down with its full might. With her heart racing and her mind steeled, she braced herself for what lay ahead. What would it take to confront the very source of her fears, and strive not just for professional success, but for the freedom to express her true self? As dawn broke, painting the walls of Sarah's apartment in warm hues, she understood that this was a fresh beginning. The remnants of the night's conversation clung to her like a second skin, but beneath the weight of uncertainty lay a burgeoning sense of determination. She turned to her laptop, resolutely reminded of her vision. This project was more than just work. It was a manifestation of her beliefs, her capabilities, and her identity. With her fingers poised over the keys, Sarah began drafting her project proposal. Every paragraph became a defiant reminder of her resolve. The goals she outlined weren't merely aspirations. They were declarations of potential, of change, of the future she envisioned. And yet, as she crafted her words, the specter of Mark's father loomed larger, reminding her of the shadows that could threaten her progress. Was she really ready to face him? Sitting back, she took a moment to breathe, to contemplate her next steps. Thoughts tumbled through her mind. The fear of disapproval, the desire for acceptance, the exhilaration of standing proud in her choices. Each one challenged her to dig deeper, to uncover resources within herself she hadn't acknowledged. She felt a pulse of energy, an electric ambition coaxing her forward, urging her to pursue not only her professional life but also her internal landscape. Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her reverie. It was Mark, an innocuous emoji-filled text, but Sarah's heart raced not from anticipation or affection, but from the residual anxiety that their previous conversation had ignited. Could she maintain her resolve while also holding the relationship intact? She needed to articulate her newfound conviction to him, but weighed this against the potential fallout with his father. A reflection of her thoughts was met with her own image in the mirror. Who was she becoming? The answer felt powerful. If she could transform uncertainty into determination, what could she not overcome? She resolved to embrace this challenge, to harness every ounce of her intuition and intellect. Each conversation with Mark was a necessary recalibration not just of their relationship but of who she was becoming. As days unfolded, Sarah set meetings with potential collaborators and mentors, eager to gather insights and foster connections. Apart from brushing up on her skills, she sought opportunities to present her ideas. In every pitch, she felt her voice strengthening. What had started as a whisper of uncertainty roared like a flame fueled by passion. The once daunting idea of facing criticism morphed into an energizing challenge. Feedback was a tool for growth, one that she seized with fervor. However, as she climbed this new summit, the friction of uncertainty lingered, particularly regarding Mark's father. Weeks flew by, each filled with meetings, practice sessions, and discussions that honed her project further. Yet, an unspoken tension wove into every interaction with Mark, eroding their shared space. The nights turned restive, sleep eluding her as her internal struggle intensified. Each day that passed without confronting the looming obstacle transformed her resolve into a gnawing doubt. Today, she decided, would be the day. She texted Mark, arranging to meet in the cafe where they had shared countless dreams and aspirations. Standing at the intersection of vulnerability and strength, Sarah sensed the approach of a tempest. She would need to open the door to her fears and forge a path through the storm. Taking a deep breath, she whispered to herself, "It's time." The moment had arrived to face not just Mark's father but the entirety of what that confrontation signified. As she slipped into the cafe, her heart pounded not from fear but from an undeniable urge to claim her space. With every step, she knew she was not just stepping into the cafe but stepping into her own power. Sarah was prepared to confront the very person who represented the naysaying shadows, ready to transform doubt into affirmation. But would all her preparation be enough to alter the course of this confrontation? Sarah arrived at the cafe, each footfall echoing her resolve. The transitional lull between the mundane bustle and impending confrontation loomed, a palpable tension that knotted her stomach yet fueled her determination. She recalled the delicate maze of her journey. Each step, every challenge had cultivated her courage, emboldening her to face the shadows of doubt. Mark was already seated, his gaze pinched in concentration as he scrolled through his phone. When he looked up, the worry lines across his forehead softened momentarily. "Hey, you made it." I was starting to think, he trailed off, fumbling with the words that had held back a torrent of concerns. "I'm here, Mark, and I'm ready to talk," she stated, her tone steady. The unwavering conviction coursing through her veins quelled the growing anxiety. "About my dad? No," she interrupted firmly. "This isn't just about him. It concerns us and what I want to achieve." She felt a pulsing energy as she finally directed the narrative. "How do you plan to handle this?" he asked, cautiously probing. "I intend to strengthen my project, not uproot it in fear of his judgment. I will remain steadfast in my direction because that's what I owe to myself. And I need you to understand my commitment." The weight of her words grounded the moment, knitting a fabric of trust between them. Mark nodded slowly, the apprehension uncoiling from his spine. "I know you can do this," he said quietly. "I just worry about the backlash." "Change doesn't emerge from comfort," she replied, clarity illuminating her thoughts. "We cannot afford to let fear dictate our paths. It's true that your father can exert influence, but I refuse to be defined by his expectations." Across the cafe, the world ebbed and flowed, a reminder that life pressed on, indifferent to personal struggles. This stirring became Sarah's foundation, sculpting a bridge between her passion and the transformative actions she would take. She would not only confront Mark's father but also solidify her network, asserting her right to be heard. As she sipped her coffee, a moment of conviction grabbed hold. "Let's arrange a meeting with him. I want him to see what I'm working on. I want to present my findings and the real impact of my research." Mark's brow furrowed in surprise. "You're serious?" "Absolutely," she declared, confidence radiating from her core. "I need this for my own peace, for my validation as a researcher, and for the cause I'm committed to. I've outgrown the limitations he has unwittingly placed on me." Her vision solidified. Commitment evolved into a mission. Together, they strategized, outlining talking points that embraced not just data, but the personal story that underscored her dedication. They crafted a plan that would give Sarah the agency to stand up to possible ridicule, readying her for a confrontation that had long loomed over her ambitions. In the following weeks, her meticulous preparation reached a crescendo. She gathered her research, structured her presentation, and mentally rehearsed her points. Stepping into the space she had created felt different now, a realm where she commanded her worth. She envisioned Mark's father not as a robust figure of contempt, but as a mere spectator to the value of her contributions. The day of the meeting arrived, the sight of Mark's family home now imbued with purpose rather than trepidation. As she opened the door, the familiar scents and decor signaled recognition. She had once entered with trepidation, but today she was armed with newfound confidence. Mark's father greeted them, piercingly observant as always. The presence of his disapproval simmered beneath a facade of cordiality. Each glance sent tremors through her confidence, but with every heartbeat, Sarah remembered the gravity of her mission. Mark began. "Thank you for meeting with us. Sarah has something to present." Sarah's heart thundered, but rather than falter, she aligned her posture, her voice rising above her doubts. "Thank you for your time, sir. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you both about my work, which I firmly believe carries significant implications for the greater community." The ensuing hour became an exchange of ideas. Statistical data flowed from her lips, woven with personal anecdotes. Mark's father remained stoic, yet she could sense a shift. Skepticism was giving way to curiosity. Then, as anticipated, questions arose. "Do you really think these findings will resonate beyond your studies?" he queried, a hardened edge in his tone. "Absolutely," Sarah responded, channeling an unwavering essence. "Environmental challenges affect everyone, and understanding them is the first step toward actionable change. Ignoring them won't make them disappear." She felt the weight of the moment settle more comfortably across her shoulders. The conversation unfolded like a tapestry, each thread connecting her knowledge with its practical relevance. By the end, she had crafted a narrative that not only showcased her findings but illuminated her essence, the passion, the resolve, the drive to evoke real change. As they wrapped up, a slight acknowledgement from Mark's father surprised her. "I suppose you have put significant work into this. I can see why it matters to you." The duality of both respect and skepticism blended in the air. The moment rippled outward. She had not only confronted her critic, but also asserted her worth as a professional. The genuine fire within had illuminated the path she always doubted existed. Later, As she stepped outside into the golden glow of sunset, a deep sense of fulfillment coursed through her. Her project was just the beginning, a launchpad for future initiatives, collaborations, and the indomitable expression of her voice. The stakes had evolved, and she emerged not merely as a participant in her life, but as a proud architect of her journey. In that moment, Sarah understood that the adversity she encountered would always hold a place in her story. The confrontation had been more than just meeting Mark's father. It was a pivotal point in reshaping her narrative, transmuting doubts into a wellspring of courage, and she promised herself, this was only the dawn of the relentless pursuit she was destined to embrace. Each choice, each conviction, would drive her forward into the world, expecting not just to be seen but to be genuinely heard. This quest didn't merely reshape her career, it fundamentally shifted her entire being, igniting her path with the brilliance only she could illuminate. A fire burned anew, and Sarah walked forward, intentional and alive, ready to own her journey. Now, dear audience, this is your moment to take action. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that empower and inspire. Leave a like now to help us feed the algorithm, ensuring you stay connected with this journey. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Sarah's transformation and what it means for us all. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion, because this message of empowerment and self-discovery needs to be heard. Don't wait even one more second to share. Your support makes all the difference.